the District of Sports podcast here at the Washington Times. I'm George Gerbo. A reminder that you can find the District of Sports on all of your favorite podcast platforms. That includes Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and more. Just search District of Sports, and also follow the work of our sports team at WashTime Sports on Twitter and at washingtontimes.com/sports. And that's where you can find the great work, as always, of our WFT lead football reporter and jack of all trades, Matthew Paris, who joins us once again here on the District of Sports. Good to hear from you again, Matt. Thanks for being back.
Yeah, it's fun as always. I always look forward to this.
And it's a busy plate, a full plate, a busy week, and a busy couple of weeks that we have here coming ahead. We've gotten through all the preparation and winding down of the unofficial end of summer, and now we are full thrust into week one of the National Football League season, and as well the first full major week of college football season, which we'll touch on with the Maryland Terrapins a little bit later in the show. But it's an all football episode, and we'll start with the Washington football team, who comes around and finally gets together, who is going to be on this team. The 53-man roster had some surprises in it, nothing too crazy. We kind of knew where this team was going to go this year, Matt, and I want you to break that down for me in a minute. There's a couple of interesting stories and interesting standouts in terms of position battles that we talked about on our last podcast. I'll mention Steven Sims, who didn't make the roster, but he ended up being signed by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Running back Peyton Barber was cut, ended up on Washington's practice squad for a second, and then the Las Vegas Raiders signed him. Quarterback Steven Montez, we talked about a few weeks ago, he ends up on Detroit's practice squad. Antonio Gandy-Golden, the mid-round wide receiver drafted last year out of Liberty by Washington, he doesn't make the full roster, ends up signed, and I believe still on the Washington practice squad. Matt, is that correct?
Yes.
It was a bit of a thing. Is he going to stick around, or are they going to add him to the squad? And so he ends up back on the practice squad. But the fun part to talk about are two guys like Sammy Reyes, the tight end, who didn't decide to play football really until the beginning of last year. He'll be the first Chilean-born player to play in the NFL, which is kind of cool. He came to the United States, went to high school in Broward County in South Florida, played basketball predominantly there, and then decided to play football, got with a trainer, started working, and now, according to Washington coaches, is one of the best, if not the best, pass blocking tight end that they have on the roster, which is just a really cool way for that to play out. And a more of a local guy, Prince George's County guy, and Jarrett Patterson, the running back, went to the University of Buffalo, undrafted, signs here in Washington, and is able to make his way onto this roster and play essentially for his hometown team, which will be out there in Landover in Prince George's County. So a couple of cool stories surrounding that, but nothing too crazy, I think, in terms of surprises, especially from what we talked about going through this preseason on our last episode, Matt.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think the two things you have to look at here are there is depth on this roster. Finally, you kind of just look at all the positions. Receiver, they have 5 legitimately pretty good receivers.
Mm-hmm.
4 of whom have had production in this league. The 5th is a third rounder in De'Ami Brown, who they're really excited about. And then they have also 2 other receivers on the roster who should contribute on special teams. But there's depth here. And I think overall is you look at this roster, there's only 16 players left from the Bruce Allen era. So what that tells me is, hey, this is pretty much Ron Rivera's team now. This is his second year going into this. He's cleaned out a lot of guys. The guys who are here left are the obvious ones, Montez Sweat, Terry McLaurin, like the big contributors, Brandon Sheriff, like, the obvious talent to keep around. But the role players and the other big name contributors, those guys are pretty much have been added under Rivera. So, they're looking to build off the 7-9 season that they won the NFC East, and there's some talent here, and I like them to compete again.
Yeah, and speaking of that talent, we finally see Curtis Samuel back on the practice field. He's been nursing a groin injury for a decent amount of time now. Was signed, of course, by Washington from Carolina in the offseason. I saw a couple of your clips from practice. Nothing too crazy, but made some cuts and everything. How have Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew talked about how he's looked, and how did he look to you in his first kind of real practice time?
Yeah, he looked fine. Like the bad thing about practice this time of year is they only allow reporters to watch 30 minutes, and then once the team stuff starts, while they work on their game plans, they shoo us off, and we go inside like to not be able to see any of that stuff. But that's just the way it goes. But from how he looked in individual drills, yeah, he looked like the speed was coming back. Certainly looked better than a few weeks ago, but they're pretty optimistic that he's going to play in week one. We'll see how he practices Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, but it, it's trending in the right direction,
Mm-hmm.
which is more encouraging given that he hasn't practiced in over 2 months before this week. So,
And Washington will hope to have Curtis Samuel as healthy as soon as possible, and for the duration of this season as they embark on the 2021 campaign, which starts Sunday at FedEx Field against the Los Angeles Chargers. And I think you make an excellent point in your story, one of your stories here leading up to game week. You can find at WashingtonTimes.com/sports, in that this defense is expected, as we expect, kind of to carry this team. It may be a little bit of a regression just because of how good it was last season, and as you mentioned, especially because of how this schedule is going to play out this year. I like the point that you make that Washington, in their 7 wins in the fourth quarter, they played a decent amount of backup quarterbacks that included Ben DiNucci, former James Madison product, Andy Dalton, who's now with the Bears, Nick Mullins, Nate Sudfeld. In the win in Pittsburgh, they got to Ben Roethlisberger, who's near the end of his career and in his late 30s. This year, by virtue of being the division winner, as Washington was last season, that means in the NFC that you draw the other 3 top division winners, and that includes the Green Bay Packers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Washington's schedule this year, as well as other tough opponents in the first couple of weeks. You've got the Chargers, of course, Sunday. They got a quick turnaround, a second home game in the first Thursday night football game, not the opening game that's featuring Dallas and Tampa Bay, but Washington will take on the Giants on NFL Network the following Thursday. Then they go to Buffalo, where you face Josh Allen and the Bills, who are expected to have another strong season. So, and then further down the line, Tampa Bay is on that schedule, a Monday night football game at FedEx Field against Seattle, and then turn around and go the next week out to play Las Vegas before finishing with 5 straight home games. And for the first time I can ever remember looking at a Washington schedule, the weird Dallas, Philadelphia, home, road, home split, which is just bonkers how they've back-ended those divisional games for the entire month of December, basically. So this defense, we could see a step back in it, but looking forward to this season for Washington, there are opportunities based on how weak the NFC East is for them to get more than 7 wins. And you would think that you would need more than 7 wins to win this division, though, you never know anymore with how crazy it was last year and the addition of a 17th game in this season, Matt. But it's going to be a little bit tougher of a slog just based on how good they were last year, which means they get some better opponents, and how some of these opponents have grown and strengthened their own rosters and expect to progress, like a Justin Herbert and the Chargers, who they face Sunday.
Yeah, I think you look at this defense, if it does, when we use the word regress, like this defense can still be in the top 10, can still post similar statistics as it did last year. They just might not be as high. But when that starts to happen, like, how does that trickle down? I was talking to someone from Football Outsiders, which is this great advanced like statistics website, and they're saying, you might notice it in a completion here or there. They might have a worse third down percentage, like areas that Washington was really strong in last year. And so if that drop off happens, then where's that slack going to be like picked up? Like, is it going to be the offense? I mean, Washington would certainly hope so. You brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick, Curtis Samuel, like all these playmakers, and a new quarterback to kind of facelift this thing. And so, yeah, I think this defense can still win games outright off the strength of the unit, but it's much harder to do that going against even a guy like Matt Ryan, who is a
Mm.
little bit past his prime now, but a former MVP. They face him in Week 4 in Atlanta, so
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm optimistic about Washington's season. I just have a little bit more questions about the defense. It may even with how strong they were last season.
And I don't want to put them in the same spot of having to be this like the whole division was this slow start last year, as all four of the teams, Washington, New York, Philadelphia, and Dallas, ended up grinding out to the end, and Washington gets it with the win in week 17 in Philadelphia last year. But you're right. It's more than, if you look past the Giants, which is it's still a division game and it's a quick turnaround to a Thursday night matchup. But yeah, at Buffalo, at Atlanta back to back, you get then New Orleans with Jameis Winston now as quarterback for the Saints at home. You then get Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs at home before then going on the road to NFC Championship game appearance, Green Bay at Lambeau Field on October 24th. So we'll have a good idea if you come out of there with a 500 record, let alone a winning record. That will kind of show you the strength of this team, because that's a very, very, very brutal first part of the schedule, all before a week 9. They at least get the bye week as kind of a midway break at week 9 of 18 this season. But you're going to know, I think, where this team stands after the first 8 games, if they are a 1 or 2 win team, or if they're more of a 3 or 4 win team. That'll, I think, Matt, give a good indication of what the rest of the season can look like for them.
Yeah, I was kind of going through the schedule the other day. I kind of like them to start strong. Like, New Orleans isn't as strong as
Mm-hmm.
they are. New York's an easy, or should be an easier win. Like,
Both at home too.
yeah, both at home. And so, if you're 2-3 or 3-2 after that first couple stretch, it's the middle of the season that gets pretty hard. You have a slate of Mahomes, Rodgers. You face Denver, so Bridgewater, but then you get Tom Brady. So like 3 out of 4 weeks, you're facing like the best of the best
Mm-hmm.
quarterbacks, and then so I think in the middle of the season they could be we could be doing the same thing. Oh, is this year a disappointment? Is this a letdown? But then you look at December, and just looking at the other teams in the NFC East, they should be right there when division games come to start. So they're actually pretty fortunate that they have this stretch to close the season, because I think they can really capitalize on it like they did last year too.
Yeah, I'll ask you. I know we're not typically in the prediction business, but I'll ask you if you're willing to put a number on it, for a total, and with everybody adjusting to the fact that there's no more 8-8 this year. It's there's
Oh
no
no.
with 18 weeks and 17 games in a season. Every result is going to be there will be no more 500. 500 unfortunately is gone. I like them obviously as a slight improvement over last year, and it still may be enough to win the division, but I see them as a 9-8 team, where you can 10 seems like a bit of a stretch to me, but I definitely see. I think you can sweep the season series against Philadelphia. Philadelphia arguably could be the worst team in football and may end up with a top 3 pick next year. As you say about the Giants, especially catching them, or again, short turnaround, but you catch them early and then you don't play them until the final game of the season. So huge gap between appearances. I think you can at least win one of those. And I think they split the season series with Dallas in those 2 games. And then from there, Carolina's at game, even on the road, you should win. Denver in a late afternoon slot at Mile High Stadium is a game you should win. Like you mentioned, Atlanta is a winnable game. New Orleans at home is a winnable game. And even this Sunday, if the defense gets in what should be a loud environment in the first full capacity game that Washington has played at FedEx Field in the regular season in 2 years. And I'm based on being at one of the preseason games earlier this season, which wasn't full attendance, but people were out and excited to be out. I think you're going to see a strong showing from Washington fans and pent up energy for being at FedEx Field on Sunday against Los Angeles. I think and then of course, owing to different things that can happen during the course of a season, they can do some surprises and pull off some surprises like they did to an undefeated Pittsburgh team last year in Pittsburgh during the pandemic season. I think I think 9 is a good number for me to see this team at for 2021.
Yeah, I would be right there as well. I think 10-7 is possible, just
Mm-hmm.
because like maybe you still win going to Denver, or you still win going to the Raiders or something like that. The Cowboys, maybe you can split with there. It just kind of depends where they're at, and yeah, like I think the division. The reason why Washington won the NFC East was because of their division last year, and
Mm-hmm.
I look at the rest of these teams, and I just have question marks about each one of them. I think Dallas's offense is going to be amazing, but I don't know how Dak Prescott's going to hold up. I think the Giants' offensive line is a mess, and the Eagles, like you said, they're rebuilding.
Yeah.
So I do think 9-8 could even win this division
Mm-hmm.
outright, but I think 10 it is a stretch, but it's not as it wouldn't be shocking to me. So I kind of have them going 10 wins, but
Okay.
they miss last words.
Yeah, I know, and you're right about it could be enough to win the division. If I had to choose now, I would choose Dallas to win the division, but that's again contingent on a lot of different things that it's about seeing how Dak Prescott, who reportedly his own words that he's not 100%, but he's going to play this season, basically, to paraphrase him. Zeke Elliott looks primed and ready to go for which should be an amazing season offensively for him. And if you can keep all that together under Mike McCarthy in year 2, then Dallas could be the team to beat in this division. But then you add the grain of salt that it is Dallas, and it is if there are asinine things that happen in this division, a lot of them happen to Washington, but a good bit of them happen to Dallas too, and things don't always go according to plan in North Texas. So that could be the one thing that derails them as that season progresses for them. But yeah, I think if Washington gets to 10, that should be. It feels like that should be enough to win this division. It doesn't seem like an 11. Nobody's going to pull off 11 or 12 wins, in my opinion, in this NFC East. Let's stick with football, and we'll round it out with the Maryland Terrapins, who opened their season Saturday in College Park against West Virginia. First time playing them in College Park in 7 years. And the Terrapins defeated the Mountaineers 30-24. In the interest of full disclosure, I am a graduate of both schools with my undergraduate at West Virginia and my master's degree at Maryland. So we'll get that out of the way as I talk about both teams. The Terrapins, huge credit to Mike Loxley, who went out and had what appeared to me to be a game plan and almost like scripted the first 20, 25 plays of Maryland's offense, because they executed it well. They moved the ball well. Talia Tagovailoa finished 26 of 36 with 332 yards and 3 touchdown passes. And they came out so good and gangbusters in the first quarter and a half. About midway into the second quarter, West Virginia held a 1-point lead at 21-20. And then everything kind of went into a lull between the mid-second quarter and going all the way to the fourth quarter before Maryland finally kind of broke it open again and scored the final touchdowns they needed in the end of the game to finally close it out. It kind of just hinged upon like Maryland looked the better team the entire length of the game. Matt, West Virginia turned the ball over 4 times. That included 2 interceptions from Jarrett Deggy, the Mountaineer quarterback. But for Maryland and Lockley and Tagovailoa, he's got the arm there. It's about just basically utilizing it in matchups. West Virginia did not have good coverage in the secondary. They were vulnerable. Maryland's plan early on, they did a lot of underneath, did a lot of screen passes, did a lot of out routes, plays in the flat that worked very well to kind of draw West Virginia in, and then the Terps were able to capitalize on that, going over top on a couple of different plays, but that kind of disappeared in the middle of the game. And if you can get Maryland to, and good job by Maryland offensive line. Tagovailoa had plenty of time in the pocket and was able to use his feet and his movement to, anytime there was pressure on him, to get out and still extend the play, and didn't make mistakes. Daggy made a couple of different mistakes, taking sacks and intentional grounding penalty, trying to throw out the ball out of bounds when he did try to throw the ball out of bounds, and then also threw some fades that were just poor decisions and ended up with 2 interceptions on his part. Tagovailoa did not make those mistakes. And so for Maryland, it's kind of what we thought going was, I don't want to say it was a big question mark, but, like, okay, in the limited action that Tagovailoa played last year, you saw that there was some potential there for, hey, this could be an offense. This could be a team that can score some points. And I think we saw that on Saturday in College Park. And I think that, I don't want to say it was restrained a little bit, but Tagovailoa, especially in the second and third quarters, Maryland could have gone over the top on West Virginia and put up even more points with the way his arm strength and his accuracy. The passes were tight. They were spirals. They weren't, they were passes with intent, for lack of a better term. He wasn't just throwing it up and hoping something was going to happen. He was looking to make the play and create the offense. And that's got to be a really, really good sign for Mike Locksley now in his third year in College Park.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think it'll be interesting to see how they build on this. Mm-hmm. Like now in Locksley's third year, they haven't really had a lot to be excited about.
Yeah.
But that date's past him. I was reminded this week when Randy Earnsel retired. Like, just this program's been in a low place for a while. It seems like they're building, and so if they can generate some actual excitement from Tagovailoa and build upon this, then I think Terrapins fans should be pretty happy. But it's really early on still. I remember them beating Texas a few years ago when we had this conversation whether Maryland was back. But, it is. We'll just kind of have to see.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. It's Locksley and Damon Evans, the athletic director. They've done a good job on trying to turn the page, because it's, since Ralph Friedgen stepped down as Terrapins coach, you went through the Randy Edsel era, which was bad on the field, and then you get to the DJ Durkin era, which was much heralded, and then unfortunately it ends up even worse than that in more ways than one. And so now they've done a good job of trying to focus this and make it about, repping the area and repping the city and repping the region. And hopefully that translates into people being excited about the program if you're from Maryland's standpoint, and at least something to give people a little bit more encouragement than they've had in the past for the better part of this last decade, and arguably since they left the ACC to join the Big Ten. To wrap it up, if I project it forward, it could be a 4-0 start, and that could lead to a ranking potentially for Maryland. They've got Howard from Washington, D.C., of course, next door in a game they traditionally play, coming out to College Park this weekend. And then Illinois, I know you're a DePaul guy, but woof. They beat in week 0. They get past Nebraska 30-22, and then Texas San Antonio comes to Champaign and they won 37-30 here in week 1. So that Illinois game, their first Big Ten game, is a winnable one on September 17th, and then they'll host Kent State and Iowa. So there is an opportunity. Heck, Kent State may be a stronger opponent for Maryland than Illinois at this point. I don't know. With how bad that's, gosh, it's Big Ten will be interesting. The Big Ten, I mean, Ohio State's there. We'll see what Michigan can do. I'm not saying Maryland could make some noise, but there's a lot of wiggle room after Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio State at the top of this conference. And Penn State will add them in too, Matt, at the top of this conference. But Illinois just didn't have it on Saturday, and that was one of many teams that ended up getting beat by lesser foes or FCS style foes.
Yeah, bring back the Lovie Smith era.
See? There you go. That's what you get. You bring well, let's keep a Big Ten guy in. You bring Brett Bielema in after his time at Wisconsin, and we'll see what it's not looking good so far for Illinois. But we digress. That'll put a wrap on this edition of the District of Sports. Matt, let everyone know where to follow your coverage for this week 1 against LA at FedEx Field, and for all of your reporting.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Matthew_Paris, Paras. And of course, check out the Washington Times. Click on the sports tab and click the articles too. So we always appreciate that.
And of course, at WashingtonTimes.com/sports, as Matt mentioned, for all of that content, at Wash Time Sports on Twitter and Instagram to follow us there. And a reminder that you can find the District of Sports on all of your favorite podcast platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. Just search District of Sports. For Matt, I'm George. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.